15.
It's a great honour for me to be able to introduce Vic Gregg, I'm his co-author, and he's lived the life, he's fought the battles that Fergal's just talked about. He's fought that battle several times. Vic was born in King's Cross. He left school when he was 14. He joined the army when he was 18, and he wouldn't tell you this because he's too modest, but the Second World War started when he was in, I think, Palestine. He found himself in 1941 in the Western Desert, where he worked with the Long Range Desert Group and the Special Air Service, driving on his own, aged 21, 22, across hundreds of miles of desert. He then found himself with the Rifle Brigade at Alamein, where he drove a carrier through at the beginning of the attack. He fought in a battle called Snipe, where the 1st Battalion, the 2nd Battalion, the Rifle Brigade, was surrounded by nearly 100 German tanks, of which they destroyed 40. He then joined the Parachute Regiment and fought at Arnhem, and was in the rear guard at Arnhem, where he was captured and became a prisoner of war. As a prisoner of war, he ended up in Dresden, and that's what we'll be talking about in just a second when I stop rabbiting on. He survived Dresden. After the war, he became a communist. He drove the chairman of the Moscow Narodny Bank. This is all true, Vic. He was also recruited by MI6, and age 70, and Vic won't mind me telling you he's 92 now, age 70, he found himself as a guest of the Hungarian Democratic Forum, cutting the wire that a few weeks later would become the fall of the Berlin Wall. He cut the wire that was the first barrier between the East and the West, and that very, very quickly is Vic's life, and it is an extraordinary life. And what I'm going to ask Vic to talk about now is how he came to be at Dresden and what happened at Dresden and how that affected the rest of his life. And I'm going to start off by asking you, Vic, how did you come to find yourself at Dresden?
Can you hear me all right? Yeah. Very good. Well, the fact is that after I was captured at Arnhem, I went into 4B, which was a huge camp, and then I didn't like that, so then I volunteered for a work camp, and I found my way down in the suburbs of Dresden at a place called Niedersedlitz, Arbeit Commando, where there was about 60 of us, and we used to do the local council work and stuff like that, nothing to do with the war. At any rate, twice I tried to escape, twice they got back to me. And as a form of punishment, the commandant issued me with a pair of wooden clogs and said, right, you can have a 6-kilometre hike to the soap factory in the middle of February. Well, it was in January, February, where the snow's about 2 foot thick, Lower Saxony, and said, well, that teach you to behave yourself sort of thing. All good-natured sort of thing it was. And yeah, it's true. And anyway, I got a bit bored with this, and I was teamed up with a lad from Yorkshire who was probably on par with me as far as being brainless. And he thought it would be a good idea to put some cement in a soap manufacturing machine instead of pumice powder, which that was all the Germans had at the time to make their soap, which looked like cement. Of course, we'd done this, and they couldn't get the consistency right, so they left it overnight. And the next morning, they go to switch on, and the factory caught alight because of all the old wiring. So they wheels us off to this, what they called a Straflager, which, if you understand German, it means excessive punishment, and you ain't going to be here very long, sort of thing. So, of course, sabotage was then firing squad, nothing less. So that was on the 13th of February that I landed in this. Of course, I mean, on the 13th in the evening, that's when they came over and started bombing the place.
Just before we go on to that, just to explain, obviously the cement froze the complete factory solid, and that's why the wiring caught fire, because none of the electrical machinery could work, and so it overheated. But when they took you out of there, Vic, what was the place like that they took you to?
Well, it was like it was right in the centre of the Altstadt, of the old of the old city, right in the centre. And it looked, well, I didn't see much of it, except that it had a sort of a domed archway. You went up some steps into it, and when we got in there, it was crowded out with all these different people of different nationalities. And it had a big glass dome roof, like a cupola. The only way we could get anywhere to sit was by a kick here and a shove there. And I mean, we were both pretty big blokes at the time, not a shriveled old wreck like I am now, but so we made ourselves fairly comfortable, as comfortable as we could, but it was a hell of a place. It was evil it was. Everybody was there for the same reason. We met a couple of Americans in there who was in there for looting, and they said they took 30 out every morning. You didn't see them anymore. Because the Germans, being methodical, that's probably what they done, took the same number out every morning. And that was it. Against the wall, bang, bang, they're dead. But luckily it never, well, it wasn't quite lucky anyway.
Can you remember the name of the guy that you were with?
Harry.
Harry.
I never knew much about him, except that I think he was captured in Italy. And I know he came from Yorkshire, and he was a big bloke. He wouldn't take orders from anybody. Of course, a lot of people would say irresponsible, but I don't look at it like that. I thought he was the sort of bloke who just wouldn't take orders from anybody who he didn't like.
And Vic, just to interrupt you, what were the first signs that the raid was happening?
Well, it's about 10 o'clock. Nobody's going to get any sleep there. You just sit down and with your knees up and talk to each other, keep each other's spirits up. Then you hear the sound of aircraft. The Flieger alarm has gone off, the aircraft alarm has gone off, but nobody takes any notice of that because it goes off every night, and they're probably bombing Chemnitz or Leipzig, which is about 60 miles to the west. Until all of a sudden the sky's lit up with these big Christmas tree things which dangle down slowly, come down through the clouds, like whacking great. And yet we could see this through the glass roof. So that was it. We knew, we knew something was going to happen. We had an idea. And the next thing we know is that we hear another noise. That's the first wave coming over. The Pathfinders have gone, dropped their flares. The first wave of 600 or 700 planes come over, start dropping all these thousands of incendiaries and stuff like that. And 3 of them went through the roof. And all the glass shattered, naturally. So there's about 30 or 40 dead men underneath that lot. And then there's the stuff from the incendiaries, whether it's phosphorus or thermite, that drops. It's like a jelly, and it drops and you can't get rid of it. If you put anything over it to smother it, that catches alight as well. So what you're watching is a crowd of men burning to death, and you can't do anything about it. They're screaming their head off, and that's the first. We knew then that we was in trouble. And then what happened then was that all the smoke was going up through the hole in the ceiling. Well, it wasn't much of a hole, there was hardly any ceiling left. But then there's this whacking great crash, and this bomb landed outside the building, which blew in this wall and blew me over the other side of the hall, and I was covered in masonry and dust, and I was unconscious then for a little while. I don't know how long, it might have only been about half a minute. And then I'll make my way back, and I can hardly see because I've got all this dust in my eyes. Anyway, I find Harry, he's dead. He was not a mark on him, he was just sitting against the wall where I left him. But his inside was blown out by this blast bomb. So then I covered Harry up, best I could. And then there's a lot of cracking and stuff like that going on. We realised the building's going to collapse. Well, those of us that were left, I should think out of the 300 there was about 40 left. And you get outside into the road, and then you can't stand the heat because everything's alight. This was almost at the tail end of the first raid, and there's people burning and people screaming, and you can't do nothing. You can't find a way out. Everywhere you go, there's either a wall of flame, and these incendiaries are coming down all the time on top of you, hundreds of them. There was 3 types of incendiaries. A small one, like the 3 that burst through the roof. They were about 2 or 3 foot long. And then there was a bigger type, same type, stick, but they were much bigger. And then you had what they called a cookie, which was either a 1,000 or a 4,000 bomb filled with napalm. And if that dropped, then anything within about 300 yards was immediately incinerated. So that's what we walked out into.
How many raids were there after that first one? How many more raids were there after the first one?
Well, after we got out the building, I suppose the first raid was nearly over then. The fire, although everything was alight, it probably like a normal raid. I don't know what you call normal, but normal to us. And then there's a lull. And after about half hour, people who can walk about start congregating, and in about an hour, things are starting to get organised again. Because the Germans are like that. They're very organised people, for good or bad. But, that's how they behave, and to their credit, they got everything organised. Unfortunately, after about 2 hours, the alarm goes off again. There's another 800 planes come over. And these ones have got the 1,000 and the 4,000 pound bomb cookies, and they didn't have any more of those little incendiaries, they had the bigger ones. But they also had these whacking great blast bombs, what they call blast bombs.
And Vic, what were the sights that you saw in the streets? What were the sights that you saw in the streets as those next two raids came? What did you see in the streets?
People burning to death, and you couldn't do anything about it. And then after the second raid had been in operation, since the bombing of Hamburg 9 months previous, they brought it to a fine art. They knew exactly how big the bomb had to be to blow the roofs off, because they wanted a lot of the walls standing in order to create drafts. And it was these drafts which fed the flames. And all the centre of Dresden was already a furnace. Anybody in the centre of Dresden by this time had it. They was all dead. And the wind starts coming up to feed the fire. And the way to safety was not to go with the wind, but to try and walk against it. But you had to hold on because these winds were... And then at the same time you're breathing all this hot air, and that's going in your lungs, and your clothes by this time are brittle. You can't get out. There's no way out.
Vic, because this story really takes a lot more than 15 minutes to tell, I'm going to jump to the end. What was the effect that Dresden had on the terrible things you saw on the firestorm had on your life?
Well, the effect is that I think you become a bit of a psychopath. Well, your mind gets turned against anything. It gets turned against all authority, because all that evil has come from authority. The evil, as I see it, which was compounded, we had to use evil against evil, and that evil we used was compounded against the original evil, and we became even worse than the people we were trying to get rid of. So you've lost faith in everything. You think only of yourself. You can't help it. You don't know what you're doing. your mind is completely bent. You don't understand society. You make your own rules. It destroyed my first marriage, and I was dedicated to that marriage, but I couldn't even see what I was doing. I didn't know the damage I was doing. And it took me about 35, 40 years. And I thought I'd got rid of it all, until this bloke here picks up a manuscript, and now it's all come back again. So,
and that is a very, very brief sort of description of an extremely bad, terrible event from somebody who was there. Vic could talk for an hour about this, but he can't, because that's the end of it. So thank you very much indeed, Vic.